Well, I brought this on myself. Welcome, Bones and Ghouls, to Halloween in July! This year the theme is Aliens! It's that special time of year where if you pledge yearly to my Patreon, you can get a whole slew of special thank you gifts for keeping the channel going. Now, I know a lot of things have been a little, silly this year with current goings on, but they basically did not affect me since I was already DIY to begin with. In fact, now thanks to living in a space where I can keep my own tools, I can make my aprons even more cost effectively than ever, thanks to not needing to pay a fee to use someone else's tools or facilities, and I can buy materials that I want to use at a better rate, like, in bulk. So not only is the yearly tradition of discounting the yearly rate for the Patreon, as low as it'll go, still a thing, but this year I've got even more for you. That's right, on top of getting the patron patch as a free thank you gift for any yearly pledge, if you pledge yearly at the $5 recipe tier or higher, you get your own patron apron to do all the cooking segments in, which by the way, thanks to being able to source my own materials, the design is now twice as large. But what's even better is you will get a special surprise thank you gift. Put it on your backpack, on a lanyard, on a lapel for a sport coat. Put it in your ventilation system so that you can hear the secrets it wants to whisper to you. It's yours to do as you please with. This will probably be the $10 yearly pledge reward next year, but since this is still experimental, it's with the $5 tier for the apron this year. All of these are free thank you gifts for choosing to support me with your pledge, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, I've got something extra special to kick off this spooky season. Something so cursed it is a historical landmark of YouTube game reviews. Something that changed the course of games in the franchise it represents. Aliens, Colonial Marines. Yep, if I'm gonna do an alien-themed Halloween in July, I gotta do this classic. That word feels extremely wrong, but that's what we're gonna go with. Aliens, Colonial Marines follows the exploits of a group of Colonial Marines who are returning to the planet where the movie Aliens takes place and proceeds to show gameplay that was dated for the time it was intended to be released. But more on that later. And also, it is the worst possible implementation of that gameplay. I took psychic damage playing this, and I'm making this video so that no one curious about this game will ever have to suffer through it the way I did. It is as bad as everyone talked about when it came out. It is not fixed by changing a simple word in the code, because even if that did work, there's so much more wrong with this game. It is possibly the worst game to ever come out on the PlayStation 3, and I have also played Walking Dead Survival Instinct and Alone in the Dark 2008 on this console as well. Just in case it somehow isn't immediately hitting home just how poorly received this game was when it initially came out, there was a class action lawsuit filed against it for deceptive advertising practices based on what was shown at various showcases like E3 versus what was actually on the disc and what people played when it came out. A lot of stuff happened. I think it lost its class action status. I think it eventually paid out big, I think. The legal system is very, very complicated, especially when it comes to large-scale lawsuits. But none of that matters for me, because this is years after the fact, and I know what I'm signing up for right now. Charl, I hear you say. Isn't it a lot better now that we figured out the typo thing and can play it with friends on PC with mods and such? Well, I worried that modern hardware convenience and the temptation to use third-party mods would be an issue, blinding me to the authentic experience of this game. As some of you know, I have that capture system that not only gets around HD copy protection, which all 7th generation consoles have, since gaming videos were literally not really a thing back then, and people just assumed if you were trying to capture footage off a console, you were trying to bootleg DVDs. But this also allows me to record anything with an analog output. And in order to have the most authentic experience possible, I am playing this game as it was originally released on my PS3, no patches, maximum pain. I am playing exactly what people played when this game finally came out years after it was supposed to, and what got so many people upset as it clearly wasn't what was teased at earlier. If anything, this was worse than what the trailers hinted at. This experience will be authentic. This experience will be painful. This experience will be greasy. A couple quick things before we get really into it. First, I was not expecting for Halloween in July to go into August this year, so I'm gonna keep the whole thing going until the end of August for the Patreon discount, just because who knows, I might do what I've done like a couple times where I get bored midway through all my time off and decide, yeah, I'll just make one more video. And then secondly, just for a quick correction, I frequently get the dates of Aliens Colonial Marines and Alien Isolation mixed up because I was looking at both of those games a lot for the end of the video. Aliens Colonial Marines released in 2013 and Isolation in 2014. So just keep that in mind for like when I say periods of times for like years and stuff. This is the final addendum I am making to this video, but ironically the first you are hearing. And I'll just say that there is something not only about playing this game, but even talking about this game that just melts your brain. I don't know what it is, but well, we got through it. I got through it anyway. You guys got like an hour worth of video to go. Good luck with that. Welcome to Aliens Colonial Marines. Do you like the worst, most base level early 2010s brown and blue filter over everything shooter drivel? Well, too bad, because that's what we get here. Everything else aside, the core gameplay of Aliens Colonial Marines is just terrible. You are going to shoot at guys in linear hallways with conveniently placed chest-high obstacles. I hope you like shooting gallery segments where the xenomorphs will all come at you in a single file line, and when they hit you, the game will go, "Bloody screen, so real!" And then your health will regenerate up to the next tick in your little bar. The gunplay in Colonial Marines is just bad. Even for 7th gen console shooter like standards, it is bad. There is a variety of guns, but none of them feel like anything other than a stat stick. So the only time I really switched between like the same gun of like a different type was when I ran out of ammo for one I was using and need to switch to the other until I got some more ammo. Like yeah, one assault rifle is burst fire and the other is full auto, except when you find the legendary variants, which are the lamest legendary variants of any weapon I've ever found in a game. But the damage is so similar that my main deciding factor for which I used out of any of the variants of any of the weapons I found was, what do I currently have ammo for? We'll talk more about the guns here and there since there's a lot of stuff going on, and like everything else in this game, it's a mess. For starters, one thing that might have made guns more unique is that the guns all have secondary fire. The assault rifle has a grenade launcher, the pulse rifle has a flamethrower. Or maybe I'm getting that the wrong way around. It doesn't matter though, because with the upgrade points, you unlock a flamethrower for one and a grenade launcher for the other, negating the one thing that made the rifles and every other main firearm in this game unique. Yep, this is an extremely 2008 era game despite being slated for 2009 and not coming out until 2014. Completing missions, killing things, and finding arbitrary secrets will get you experience points that eventually will get you leveling up and getting skill points. Each level up will get you a single skill point that lets you unlock a single new weapon modification. And if you're old enough to rent a car, you know exactly how this system works because it was in everything in the 7th generation console like life cycle when everything needed to have a tacked on multiplayer system. It's gating anything that makes your weapon better or like feel better, or making useless weapons potentially useful and fun behind tons of grind in order to make you play more of the tacked on multiplayer, which I can't because server go boom because, geez, it's been over a decade now. As a point of reference, there are things that start unlocking at level 25 if you want the really good stuff or to max out certain stats in a weapon. And a run of the campaign only got me as high as level 15 right at the very end of the campaign. I'm not grinding another whole playthrough and maybe a half depending on how experience scales to tell you that the level 25 mods make the shit weapons slightly less shit. It's literally ticks on a slider for how good each stat is, which you can see whether or not you unlock them. A system like this works in other games where it's contained to the multiplayer and you aren't getting screwed over in the main game. Kinda sorta contemporary game BioShock 2 did level gated weapons and buffs fairly well, and such a thing was squarely left in the realm of the multiplayer. While yes, Aliens Colonial Marines was intended to be a multiplayer co-op experience, it was intended to be a lot of things that didn't end up happening. So why on earth would you not have a single player profile that accounts for one human among several computer controlled squad mates and then a separate one for multiplayer? Having the same level of gating for multiplayer single player means that you are going to try and play single player and you're going to go through the entire game only getting like half the possible weapon upgrades at most unless you do an insane amount of grinding. Thank God this also wasn't always online, which was another big trend back then, or else I'd be in a lot of trouble. Oh yeah, and about those CPU squad mates. Come to think of it, did people that played like multiplayer have these squad mates? Were these guys like ever there, like if your lobby was full? Who cares? There's Cruz, O'Neill, and Bella, and I think some other guys, but I only remember these names because as I was writing this, I went and looked back at my footage to see their little name tags above their body to figure out who they were for this specific sentence. Oh yeah, Bishop is here sometimes too. Or a Bishop, I'm not quite sure how it works. The only ones that really have anything meaningful about them that sets them apart is that O'Neill gets a smart gun, and according to some stuff people said in chat when I streamed this, on different versions of this game that came out later, he got buffed to the point that once he gets a smart gun, he will play through the game for you. This is not the case on the original PS3 version. He sucks and is essentially useless like everyone else. Then there's Bella, who's a girl. Yeah, that's it. We're literally back to 1980s cartoon standards where not being a dude was considered a defining character trait. Bella is essentially a plot device, although we're not into story stuff yet, so we'll just leave it there. And just like everyone else in your squad, she's gonna awkwardly path over to cover and shoot at people, and sometimes she might even hit them or kill a guy that you've already damaged. Sometimes they can't path to cover at all and they just awkwardly stand there, which, well, at least they can't die, so that's a plus. I bet the only reason they can't die is because the devs knew the pathing was crap and that they get lost and shot at until they died, leaving you on your own and somehow in a worse situation despite already playing Colonial Marines. Look, I know it's not exactly fair to make these comparisons, but despite this, Fear coming out 4 years before Aliens Colonial Marines was supposed to come out, and comparatively, the AI and pathing is laughably bad in that case, like what we've already established. And it's compared to basically anything else on the console, like, because we've got the game like Fear, we've got the early 3D Fallouts, and even Oblivion, which is infamous for its janky NPCs, still handles better than Colonial Marines NPCs. Dudes on both your team and the enemies will just get lost or stuck. Xenomorphs ironically have a hard time when they're trying to swarm around you, and at times will just awkwardly wait their turn to bum rush your squad, but will sometimes just get lost on the way to where you are. And on that note, there is just an unbelievable amount of stuff that isn't even considered jank, but just outright bad design. Stuff like turret systems, just to name something off the top of my head, that were used once, maybe twice, and then just forgotten about right after we're done doing it, which I can understand. Maybe someone in charge was playing those early Modern Warfare game stories, and those story modes love to just make you do random stuff once and then never do it again. But there's so much stuff that's just outright bad before we get into stuff that's unfinished, buggy, or otherwise incompetently implemented. In order to stop this from becoming a mess of insane ramblings like it already is, I'm gonna limit myself to 5 things to talk about here that aren't necessarily buggy, they're just poor game design. Like, you know how that thing is going around that so-called game experts get so heated about, the yellow paint thing? Now, normally yellow paint, which isn't literally just yellow paint, but is shorthand for being heavy-handed with something called signposting, is divisive and often argued as being overbearing by some or a necessary evil to help idiot-proof video games by others. People started caring about this around the time that we all got fed up with dudes drawing lines all over screenshots of video games for dopamine point. Can be used well in certain scenarios, like this part in the game Soma, where it's all about adding the tension as you have to follow these literal lampposts signposting you to find where you need to go. However, Aliens Colonial Marines is nowhere near the caliber of game that Soma is. Aliens Colonial Marines is a comically bad offender of this trope a full decade before people started getting heated about signposting. In Colonial Marines' case, it's totally reasonable to mock the random bright yellow things here because almost all the time, it's a hasty fix for some comically bad level and visual design. I really started noticing this first during that level, but we're going to talk about that level in the jank section later on because, it's one of the most famous things about this game. But this is really comically obvious towards the end of the game. I really don't think anyone cares about spoilers for a game that every person ever has told you not to play and is well over a decade old now, so I'm just going to tell you, in this game, there's a level where Wei Yu does the thing that Wei Yu always does in Aliens media, and there's this big, ugly, dark, like blue and gray level, just like all the other big, ugly, dark blue and gray levels, except now it's covered in xenomorph goop. Guess how they tell you which way to go in this mess of a level? Yep. Dudes in big yellow hazmat suits tacked onto the walls. It is yellow paint all the way down. And I can see why. The design of so many levels is so bad that even with yellow paint, I was getting lost a lot. Everything is just a bunch of bluish gray linear hallways that all kind of look vaguely the same. Among many of the problems associated with how dark this game is that it's so hard to orient yourself without random bright yellow something or others signposting your way to the next game objective. Speaking of things that are hard to navigate, the menu system in this game is crap, at least for weapon selection. Eventually I got the hang of it after tweaking things in the options menu, but I've played a lot of shooters, and this is the most nonsensical weapon select system I've seen on a console. It took me several hours of playing this game just to figure out how exactly this game wants you to switch between weapons, and it doesn't help things at all that Colonial Marines feeds you morsels of information about how it works piecemeal over those few hours. It's already weird enough that this game tries to be a two-gun game and a full arsenal game at the same time, so the best I can figure out is the face button menu allows you to pick your main two weapons, but it will take a bit to figure that out. But if you want to switch between your weapons or to a pistol or a throwable, you're going to have to use the directional buttons. After an entire playthrough, I still don't know exactly how the directional buttons work, but if I had to guess, I just keep hitting left or right until eventually I can get to my grenades, but I'm going to have to see my pistol a lot first. By the way, you have armor in this game that is somewhat regularly available and regenerating ticks of health. You know, that system that so many games haphazardly put in to try and get around the regenerating health is lame mindset. Honestly, after this and Transformers War for Cybertron, I am squarely in the opinion that I'd rather just have one or another. Give me either a hard health system where I need to be mindful of pickups, or fully regenerating health where I have to be careful about how long I'm in a fight. The tick system is the worst of both worlds, because not only can you get stuck at low health with no pickups like in a hard health system, but also you have the sparse, at times non-existent amount of health pickups that comes with a regenerating health system. I hope you like turtling your way through long, gray corridors and shooting galleries because some goon winged you with a hit scan right at the start, and now you keep on having to wait patiently for like the 1.5 ticks of health you have to regenerate. And this is a console shooter, so you know we've got that auto aim. The auto aim in Colonial Marines is particularly bad, in a sense that you almost always need it to hit anything. For the uninitiated, auto aim on a console is when, in order to replace the fine motor controls that you can normally get with a computer mouse where you can set the DPI for aiming at precise targets, as long as you use the thumbsticks to aim in the general area of something you want to shoot at and then press the aim down sights button, the game will cheat for you and correct your cursor position to right where it needs to be to make the shot. Normally, this isn't too obvious, and if a game is doing a very good job at mitigating the auto aim, you'll never notice it. But in the land of Aliens Colonial Marines, even after trying to adjust the stick sensitivity, you aren't hitting anything unless you get really mashy with the aims down sights key, and even then you're gonna have a hard time aiming at anything because if you try to focus for too long, you're not going to be able to keep up with the movements of whatever you're shooting at, and you have to zoom out and aim down sights again. I ended up using the shotguns for a lot of this game, even when they were far less than the ideal weapon for a situation at hand, because between the spread and abusing the auto aim, it made it kind of bearable to play through most of this game. Kind of bearable. There are situations where you're going to need to use your rifles, which are essentially spray and pray, unless you want to do the big stupid and try to aim with those things, and God forbid you have to use anything that requires precision, like the battle rifle. I'm pretty sure I know why there's only one version of the battle rifle in this game, whereas there are two versions each for the shotgun and assault rifle. It's hell to use. Oh yeah, and I might be double dipping here, but I'm going to excuse this as being part of the UI and auto aim. For some reason, the whole HUD shakes and rotates whenever you move or turn. I have no idea why it would do that. It's disorienting at best, and according to some people in my stream, absolutely nauseating. Seriously, why would you do this? All it does is make it hard to keep track of stuff like your ammo, and it's probably adding more resource-intensive crap to a game that is already pushing the limits of the end-of-life console it's on. I'll admit that I did not notice this at first until after like the 10th time someone in chat brought it up, but then I couldn't stop seeing it. The HUD and the UI are bad enough without everything jiggling around. And then we have, to just put a bow on all of this, what I called the Rhinomorph. I know enough about Aliens continuity to know that the Xenomorph lifecycle either adds a new permutation or just changes completely between almost every movie, so there's no point in being a stickler about what is and is not something that Xenomorphs can do. Plus, Alien 3 established that the end result of a facehugger depends on what it latches onto, but that kind of contradicts what I just said. But did Wei you have like a rhino or a triceratops on hand for this thing? That's not why this fight is the final item on my list though, about things that are just bad about Colonial Marines. Before we get into the unpolished and jank that is, the fight against this thing is exactly what you'd expect to be by looking at it. This thing charges at you, and you gotta dodge it and shoot it between charges. Now, can anyone tell me what the issue is with having a fight like this in a game like this, or any other console-based first-person shooter for that matter? That's right, class. Having a charger fight in a first-person game where you are limited by thumbsticks to move and turn around is a terrible idea, because the act of dodging and then turning around and shooting at your enemy is nearly impossible. You do not move nearly fast enough to laterally strafe out of the way of this thing, so you have to turn all the way around and run forward to get out of the way. The problem there is that if you want to be able to turn fast enough to get out of the way, you're going to have to increase your stick sensitivity to the point where you're going to have a hell of a time aiming at the Rhinomorph, or anything for that matter. So now you're left with a choice of, do I want to endlessly dodge this thing most of the time, but never be able to hit it back? Or do I want to get constantly winged by this thing with like mild hits and hope you can dump enough damage into it before it chunks away your health bar? Trick question. If you keep your stick sensitivity low enough to aim at it, you won't be able to turn back around fast enough to shoot at it before its armored side is facing you again, and it's already charging at you a second time. Through the course of many times I had to attempt this fight, I became intimately aware of exactly when this thing was able to take damage because, surprise, surprise, this thing is invulnerable as it walks into the boss arena and will not take damage until it does all of its stupid little animations. You might have noticed these concrete barriers around the arena and thought to yourself, oh, maybe that's part of the boss fight's mechanics, and you'd be right in the worst way possible. You see, these are not a way to stun or even slow down the Rhinomorph. It doesn't even have an animation for colliding with these barriers, or at the very least, if it does, I never saw it for some reason, which is frankly plausible considering how much of this game works as intended. They just sort of crumble around the Rhinomorph. I honestly don't know if this is a glitch, or if they just didn't have the time to make the animations for colliding with the concrete barriers, but what matters is that they aren't a problem for the Rhinomorph. They're a problem for you. You see, if you are even so much as brushed by the Rhinomorph when you are in front of these barriers, you instantly die. And you know what? That's fair. It would have been a lot nicer if there was any sort of stun or slowdown when the Rhinomorph crashes into these barriers, but that's just not how it is. It's just an instant death, so get as far away from these things as possible as soon as you trigger the fight. This fight is the moment that you will also notice that this game has long load times, like 30 to 60 seconds per reload, depending on how intense of an area you gotta load into. This is a PS3, which is running on an ancient internal HDD, loading in a whole lot of blue and gray. Sometimes during this fight, I'd be alive for less than a minute before dying, and then just have to sit there and wait for the game to load again. It was a lot of time for me to just sit there and think about the series of actions that led me to playing Aliens Colonial Marines on a PS3 over a decade after it came out. Okay, quick addendum here as I watch myself die to this thing a lot in post. I think the concrete barriers still have something to do with just getting insta-killed, but I also couldn't help but notice that this big gray blobby thing that's immediately behind the concrete barriers looks like it explodes, causing instant death. And I noticed a couple times when I instantly died, I wasn't quite near a concrete barrier that he rammed me through, but instead just this, I think it's a fuel tanker. It's just such a big gray blob that even when I'm looking at it in post, I can't exactly figure out what this is supposed to be. But I guess that if the Rhinomorph accidentally rams this like fuel tank thingy, you instantly die as well. And it might just be that. It might just be, oh, you die by the fuel tank, but why have a bunch of barriers like that in front of a fuel tank? I'm trying to be as fair as I can to this game, but sometimes things are so jank and things are so opaque and just hard to figure out that I can't tell if it's I'm dying because I'm getting smushed between the Rhinomorph and the concrete barrier, or am I dying because I happen to be within a certain distance of the Rhinomorph charging into what might be a fuel tanker or something. And then if so, how come the fuel tanker doesn't go off like when it charges in that direction? Because it seems to be the trigger is if he charges you past the barriers near the fuel tank, it just blows up. I don't know, man. It's just, this fight was probably the worst part of this whole game. So I'm trying to be fair, but bear with me here. Just everything about this fight is so telegraphed and so tanky, and the controls are so unpleasant, which as I look at my footage, it's hard to tell, like in the moment, how bad it is. But of all the games I have played using my thumbsticks on my PS3, which I am using like an OEM PS3 6-axis controller that is in good condition, the game just handles so poorly. And then you get into a fight like this where you're fighting something that you gotta dodge a lot, and it's just hell. Oh god, this whole addendum is going to add more time to the video. Okay, so that was all the stuff that, as far as I can tell, is working as intended, or at least how they plan to put it in, but is simply bad design. Now we're gonna get into the stuff that's like actual jank. There is so much jank that we need to split the jank segment into two parts and put the cooking segment in the middle to act as a little breather between all this jank. The first thing, which might be arguably working as intended, but is so poorly implemented that I am considering it jank, is the tutorial system. Stuff that's supposed to teach you how to play is all over the place in the worst way possible, and sometimes just doesn't make sense. I'm not sure how much of this early game is supposed to be tutorial, because they keep on adding new stuff up until you get off the ship, and half of it is like used after the fact. You're taught how to weld doors open and shut, which is used I think 2 or 3 times in the entire game after you learn how. And I don't think this game ever formally explains the knockoff Call of Duty Last Stand thing. It just sort of happens every now and again when your HP gets too low, but sometimes it doesn't. Oh, it teaches you about the motion tracker too, because we gotta have that in an Aliens game, but the thing is about as useful as a code of ethics in a Weyland-Yutani boardroom. Legitimately, there is essentially no reason to ever pull it out unless you go in the settings and disable a feature, because otherwise it'll beep loudly even when it's not equipped to tell you that dudes are coming your way. And also, this is an extremely linear shooter. I don't need a motion tracker to tell me that bad guys are about to attack me whenever I enter a room wider than a broom closet. And then there's just actual general jank. How the xenomorphs just can't find the ground or the ceiling or any surface they're trying to stick to for that matter. Stuff in general just doesn't seem to know where it's supposed to be. I say that because a lot of the prompts for picking things up or interacting with things and so on never seem to work the moment you get the prompt, and you gotta move around a bit before you can actually do the thing. It's genuinely frustrating when you're trying to get close enough to something like a health kit or armor and it never quite lines up right, though you swear you should be close enough to grab it, and I'm seeing the prompt and I'd really like to stop getting shot at, so if I could just grab this and move back to cover, that'd be great. Speaking of getting shot at, both friendly and enemy pathing is garbage at times, and people will hide behind comically inadequate cover or just stand there sometimes, but I think we already went over that. I don't know if you could tell already, but this is more of a mental breakdown than a review or whatever you want to call it of this game. Oh, by the way, there's no tension to any of these segments where you have to defend your squad mates whatsoever, because you find out that the xenomorphs will never attack the person trying to get a door open and will always go exclusively for you. This trivializes these segments, as once you figure out, you just go into a corner if it's Xenos, or go find a choke point if it's mercenaries, and you're fine. I'm honest to goodness unsure if enemy AI can attack friendly squad mates. Like, I see the baddies shooting at my squad mates, but they never go down. Like, it was a strange moment of shock when it clicked in my head that I can just ignore the squad mate that's trying to like hack open a door and just shoot at the aliens. As it's not that hard to figure out that these defense segments are most likely tied to how many enemies you kill and are not on any sort of timer related to your squad mate being able to accomplish a task. Like, yeah, I was shocked at first, but then I remembered what game I was playing and was like, oh, of course it does this. Thankfully, the game kind of forgets about these segments after the first third of the game. Let's take a break from the jank to, do some really cursed cooking, or arguably cursed, or... I just gotta stop talking about this game for a second, okay? I'm taking the opportunity to use this video about a very cursed game to make a very cursed cooking segment. We're going to be making mozzarella sticks, except that instead of a proper breading, we are going to be grinding up Doritos and using that instead. This isn't too wild, but I'd say it's a fairly cursed idea. Out of morbid curiosity, I'm going to try this with 3 flavors: classic, Cool Ranch, and Taco Doritos, but not really, because I couldn't just find Taco Doritos and had to settle for a 50-50 mix of original and taco, which is lame. And the worst part about how lame it is that when I tried just having a few chips out of the bag for the 50-50, I wasn't sure which was which. You know, I don't think I should be surprised by that, actually. We're going to turn these chips into crumbs by using a hand blender with a food processor attachment. Most hand blenders will have something like this right out of the box, and they are way cheaper than a food processor, and you get a lot more mileage out of a hand blender than a food processor. Just make sure you don't clog the little vent thingies. Take your chips, crush them up if you wanna, but I found that later on it might actually be easier to just put the chips in whole, because there's less inside the food processor's attachment of your hand blender, and since there's less chips in the attachment, that means more pulverizing per chip. This is going to take 3 to 5 batches for each if you want to get through a whole bag's worth, so get to grinding. It's important to remember that there is some moisture inside of these ground up chips as compared to traditional breadcrumbs, so these will get a little mushy as you form them, but that's going to help us out in the long run. Once you've taken care of your Dorito breading, take a brick of mozzarella cheese from the store and use basically anything to cut it into small 1-ounce sticks. We don't want them being too big, as we don't want to end up needing to fry them for longer, and then the cheese will melt and it'll just turn into, well, not a stick. Cut them up small and set them aside. So the breading setup is going to be basically the same as any other 3-station setup, save for the fact that we're using several flavors of Dorito for the final stage, and also because at the time of filming, egg prices were going crazy like they do sometimes, so I opted to use buttermilk. In case you don't know, buttermilk will act in basically the same way as beaten eggs for the wet station of a breading like 3-station like setup. And even when eggs are normal prices, buttermilk will be cheaper to use ounce for ounce versus beaten eggs. For the time being, we're not going to add anything to the buttermilk, as it's going to get thicker as we add more dredge sticks to mix and coat, and the more we do that, the more bits of dredge flour get mixed into the buttermilk, and the thicker it gets. Speaking of that dredge, we want to taste the Dorito, so we're not going to do all that much to the flour dredge. I'm just going to add a bit of that bread seasoning mix, you know, the fancy herb mix they pour over oil at some Italian restaurants, which you can just get this in a 1-liter shaker at the restaurant supply store if you like it that much. It's great on toast. We've done this dance before. One hand handles the dry thing, the other handles the wet things. Take the 1-ounce pieces of mozzarella you cut up and then try to dredge them as best you can before putting them in the buttermilk and then onto the Dorito crumbs. I alternated here so I got a roughly even number of each flavor, but personally I would only suggest doing 1 flavor of these at a time because that's just a lot of stuff you gotta work with. Now don't immediately get the oil heating up. We need to freeze these for at least a few hours so that the cheese doesn't melt into nothing when we fry them. We just need to fry the coating here, not the cheese itself, and making sure the cheese is frozen is going to go a long way in ensuring that. Alright, it's been a few hours, it's time to fry. We're gonna get out our pot full of oil that is not nearly full, but more like halfway full. You always want to make sure that you are saving plenty of room in your frying oil pot for the physical displacement of whatever objects you're putting in there, as well as the natural expansion of liquids and other such things when they get hot, because that's just how physics work. Once our thermometer hits the sweet spot on the frying oil temperature, put in a few sticks at a time, and these should need no more than a single minute to fry. And I don't know if you can notice this, but I stopped bothering to sort these by flavor that they were coated in, because by the time they came out of the fryer, it was all the same. The outside texture was burnt tasting, albeit a very crunchy coating, and while that part was very disappointing, I was able to get some legendary cheese pulls from these bad boys. If I had to guess what happened here, it's that the actual flavoring on the Doritos is an extremely thin coating, and when I put them in the intense and abrasive hot oil, it all gets blasted off. That was an extremely disappointing result, so after a few months of thinking about it, I came back and tried again. This time, I'm keeping the flour dredge, but I'm adding a good bit of flour into the buttermilk so that it becomes like a thick slurry so that more Dorito can cling on. That is the only meaningful change I made, and I did not bother to film it because we're just getting right into the cooking. What I'm doing now is not only giving the cheese sticks a full 24 hours to freeze so that they might also lose some excess moisture from the Doritos, but also I'm using an air fryer instead, which should theoretically be a lot more gentle on the coating as it's not being submerged in hot oil. I tried the default setting for heating mozzarella sticks according to my air fryer's reference sheet, and a much lower temperature than that after the fact, because I also thought it would be wise to stay below the smoke point of most oils, because probably that smoke point is also the get annihilated off of a chip point for flavor, like powder, whatever they use here. So I was able to get 3 tries at this, and while I didn't quite get it down to perfection, I got pretty close. Close enough to give some recommendations. So when I tried air frying these on the default setting for the cheese sticks, they came out nice and gooey, still holding their shape, but the Dorito coating was burnt all over. I could still taste the Dorito flavor a bit, so it was only the most minor of successes, but I thought we could still do better, so I tried again the next day. The second time around, I knocked it down by 25 degrees and set it for 15 minutes instead of 10. The Dorito coating was still burnt, but a lot less, but now we had a new problem. The cheese sticks were being heated for long and they just kind of fell apart. I couldn't even get them out of the air fryer in one piece. For the final try, I brought this all the way down to 350 degrees and gave it only 12 minutes. This was possibly the best because there was very little burning, if at all, on our Dorito crust, and the Dorito flavoring very much came through. And while the cheese sticks split at the top a little, I could still get them out of the air fryer mostly intact. A new problem arose though. I had one thicker cheese stick that was completely cold in the middle. Sure, it didn't break my teeth or anything, but I want a hot, gooey center to get that sick cheese pull. I could still get a great cheese pull off the other two that were kind of split in the middle though, so I'll just leave you with this. Make your cheese sticks no more than 1 ounce by weight for the cheese and no thicker than ½ an inch across. Coat well to avoid leaking and then air fry them at 350 degrees for no more than 10 minutes, turning once at the middle. That should get this done for you. I don't know why you try this, but here it is for you. If you want, there will be a full standalone recipe for this on patreon.com/charlatanwonder, where we're running that yearly special. The yearly discount is as low as it will let me make it, and if you pledge yearly at the $5 recipe tier or higher to get recipes like this and many others, you get that cool special apron to do all the cool cooking segments in as a free thank you gift. And like I said in the beginning of this video, since I do all these myself and now own all my own tools, I've been able to make these even more efficiently than before, so I am using my savings to throw in another surprise gift to go with the apron. Don't forget to check it out. All right, we've put this off for long enough. We gotta get back to Colonial Marines. Welcome to the Jank Part 2, the Jankening. The stuff we're gonna go over in this part of the struggling that is this video are things that blur the line between is this jank and is this working as intended but just bad design? because most of the other things fit neatly into one category or the other, as best as I could figure it out. But this stuff can go either way, or is perhaps a bit of both. Let's talk about something that game devs love to talk about how hard they are to do. Doors. I have a strong disdain for doors in this game because they all fall into two very annoying categories: plot exposition doors and loading screen doors. You'll know the plot exposition doors because you can't open them for some reason and need somebody else to do it for you. Plot doors could theoretically also be loading screen doors, but they have a different purpose: dumping exposition. Aliens, Colonial Marines isn't exactly good with sliding in that exposition in a way that doesn't break the stride of the game, and while we all love to dunk on BioShock Infinite nowadays, hell, that's how I really started gaining momentum on YouTube, it's undeniable that Infinite set a new standard for narratives and first-person shooters over a year before Colonial Marines came out. Could Colonial Marines have gotten away with how it forces you to wait for someone else to open a door for you and therefore forcing you to listen to them dump exposition at you in a way that brings any momentum the gameplay had to a screeching halt in a world without BioShock Infinite? Probably not, because before the standard set by BioShock Infinite was in place, the Half-Life series existed. Standards or not, it doesn't change the fact that half the doors in this game are blocked off until someone can exposit at you about whatever is supposedly happening in the plot just off screen, and it's annoying. I kid you not, they do this so much in Colonial Marines that at one point during the stream, I just let Frisk take over while I went and got some water. Real quick, Frisk is gonna watch you all while I get some more water.
Structural damage. I'm gonna kick it in.
Christ, Nugget, go ahead and make all the noise.
You had to tell her about the Nugget thing. Just slipped out. I got point from here so we don't alert every Xeno or Way You bastard within a mile of here.
Look at this good little streamer. Are you interacting with chat? Got myself a little sparkly water as a treat. What a wonderful streamer. So well behaved and interacting and looking at the camera. You are just the light of this chat. You are... All right, you're turning the thing. I need to sit back down there. Unless, if you sit down, I will sit on the floor and you can have the chair because you have been just such a well-behaved little chonkalis that I think you deserve the big chair. This is the most joy I've felt in the last 5 hours. Then we've got the loading screen doors. You think it's nice at first when you realize that, oh, I get to open the door now. And you can hurry up with the shooting of aliens and corporate mercenaries, but then you realize, oh, this is a loading screen door. I'm not sure which of these is worse, the former or these doors where you just awkwardly stand there in silence like you're waiting for an elevator to come down, only to find out that the door opens up into a hallway like basically every other door in this game because this game is like 75% hallway. Every time this happens, this just reminds you that you're playing a game that came out in 2014 on a console that first launched in 2006. It's hard to place what exactly might be going on here with not just the big loading times between missions, and also scenarios like when you get trampled like the Rhinomorph and need to reload back into where you were, but at the same time, we've got these quote-unquote discrete loading times where you're just standing in front of a door waiting for someone to stop telling you something you probably could have figured out on your own within the next few minutes. Or worse, standing there in awkward silence for more than long enough to realize, oh yeah, you're in a loading zone. It's hard to pin down the standard in which I should be judging this, as this was a game that was supposed to be released in 2009, but ended up coming out in 2014. But by the standards of either of those periods, this is laughable. Is this an issue with the PS3 itself? I'm running this on a PS3 Slim, but after checking a few places online, there at least seems to be no meaningful performance difference between the original and the Slim PS3, and both are running these games on an HDD and a processor that wasn't exactly known for being the beefiest of boys back when it came out. Is this just an issue of the game being so bad at loading levels that they try to cover it up in the sloppiest way possible? Maybe looking at what we see when we're finally allowed to go through a door will give us some answers. Wait, never mind, I just remembered that this game is unbelievably ugly. Like, even compared to its contemporaries or other games on the same generation of console, this game is ugly as sin. It's dark too, like really, really dark. There was a point when I was playing this game on stream that I had to go into my TV settings and turn the brightness up as high as it would allow me to set it just to see what the hell was going on. Then, lucky for me, I still haven't figured out to get OBS to notice the gamma settings of games or on my TV, so these clips I show you are already bright enough to where you can see just how bad this game looks. Like, I fully admit that I originally had a section in this outline of the script where I talk about like the game teleporting in aliens and way you guys from nothing to jump you, and my reactions to that effect on stream were sincere. However, when I reviewed the footage, it turns out that the game is so dark that there are essentially monster spawners like vent covers and such, but it's just hidden by how absurdly dark this game is. Lighter dark though, the game just looks bad. It does that thing that many a sloppily made but high budget game does, where there will be things like certain moments with NPCs, cutscenes, or gun models in the upgrade menu, or maybe a set piece that look kind of good as long as you don't look too closely. But anything that moves too much for you to get a good look at it, or is something the devs thought you wouldn't be paying much attention to, sometimes looks like literal mush. Like, let's go back to that Rhinomorph fight we've been talking about, and look at the ground and all the junk that's like strewn about. Let's look at the Xenomorphs in slow motion when we have the benefit of not needing to shoot at them and can just review footage. Sure, cutscene people look nice, but in game, even the ones that you're supposed to look at, while like they block a door to explain the obvious to you, have a bad case of 7th generation console skin tone on them. Here's Deadpool, a video game which came out also on the PS3, close to the console's life cycle's end, and sure, you can tell it's a PS3 game, but it still looks decent. How about another one from High Moon, like Transformers: Fall of Cybertron, which was mid-2012, or maybe something that came out around the time Colonial Marines was supposed to come out, like the original Dead Space. Look at all these games, have I made my point yet? Alright, I put it off for long enough. Let's talk about that part. Yes, the one that everyone made such a huge fuss about when it came out. The Krusty Boys part. This whole segment starts with you getting jumped in a literal cutscene, which by the way, here's the whole context for that scene. It's so generic, it's so bad, it's like wonky, but not in a funny way. What is... Oh, that was just weirdly highlighted by the light. Oh, that's why. All right, 4 missions done. Only 7 more to go. And as you might have noticed, they don't even bother to have a super special alien that you can't kill for some reason, like jump out of anything or make an entrance. He just teleports to where you were most likely already looking at, like I was, and then the letterbox bars come on so you know there's no escaping. Also, I forget about if I talked about this or not in the gameplay segment, but the flashlight in this game that's already really dark, it's just ass. Like, you can't see anything with it. Like, there were quite a few moments when I was playing this where I kept toggling it on and off because it was really dark and I did not realize the flashlight was already on. It just does next to nothing. But with that out of the way, welcome to the mandatory stealth segment. There will be another later on, but this is the one where we take all your weapons away and everything that can possibly kill you will just kill you on the spot. I say possibly kill you because here's the big twist. I did not die once in this entire half-hour segment. This, I guess, is a good time to talk about that thing a lot of people bring up in regards to the Xenomorph AI. The whole thing where supposedly a single typo in the game's INI files essentially borks the AI, making the aliens act all weird. Well, I looked into that, and for one, there are seemingly as many people saying that fixing this typo doesn't do all that much as there are people saying it fixes everything. And also that typo pertains to xenomorphs hanging out in certain areas like defending territory and not just standing around and then instantly bum rushing you. Not whatever's going on here with the Krusty Boys, who clearly have set patrol patterns. This doesn't matter for us anyway, since we're playing on the extra greasy version of Colonial Marines in its purest, most unadulterated form. This whole stealth segment is already annoying because it's the kind where all of our toys get taken away, but also because the crusty, explodey aliens just don't work. I'm not kidding, they can literally bump into you, and as long as you're staying still and not touching the thumbsticks on your controller, they don't actually activate on you. This happened at least twice in my playthrough, so instead of carefully sneaking around and taking care to avoid anything that might trigger the Krusty Boys, you're just doing what you already did, except now you move more slowly and playing a really stupid game of red light, green light, where you're ironically following the yellow light. And then you press the button and the Krusty Boys all run over and die instantly. This goes half in the jank and half like in not jank but bad design because it's just blurring the lines. Everything is blurring the lines. My vision's starting to get blurry talking about this. I don't want to go out like this, so let's hurry up and get towards the end of the video. If I had to look at all of this jank, all of this stuff we talked about before the cooking segment and now, one thought comes to mind. This game is unfinished. Like, it's in an early beta at most, maybe the end of alpha, where all the core ideas are put in and the game is just barely scope and feature complete, but nothing's been properly tested and so many things haven't been optimized or even fine-tuned enough to be cohesive enough to form a good experience. Think about the weird pathing human NPCs have in firefights, or how so many of the pickup prompts feel weird, the odd grindy balance to get all the game weapon and upgrades, and that if you even intended this game to be a multiplayer experience, would still take at least several playthroughs just to get to the decent stuff. The whole segment we just talked about with the crusty, explodey aliens. Everything about Aliens Colonial Marines feels like the devs were just barely able to make this game in a state where it could be considered like early beta, and then it got shipped. You know, despite this game coming out like 5 years late. And it's got so many issues that I feel like if there had just been the resources or the care to beta test and fine tune this thing, well, it wouldn't have been amazing, but it wouldn't have been as infamously bad as it was. On that note, something else I want to mention before we get into the story stuff is that now that we've discussed how this game feels like it's most likely unfinished, there's a lot of stuff that we only use once or twice in the game that feels like it took a lot of resources to make. The two that come to mind are welding doors shut, which I think we only do once in the early game to learn how to do it, and then again when we're being chased something we can't fight. And then there's the power loader segments, which we do once, like at the start of the game, like same thing, learn how to do it, and then again briefly for a boss encounter. Sure, it's arguably planting and payoff in its most simple, base form, but it feels like maybe there was more that could have been done with these two features, or other things that we don't use a lot, like setting up the auto turrets. Things that definitely act different from all the other things in the game, to the point where it's safe to assume they were made bespoke and complicated enough to merit a tutorial for the player, but then are only ever used once or twice, very briefly later on, and never touched again. It's like they wanted to do more with these things. Like, why have a whole tutorial for something you're only going to do once later on in the game? But then when push came to shove, and all the other use cases were either cut or never put in the first place to get Colonial Marines out the door, but then even if we're shaving down everything right to the bone just so we can get this game in what can be argued as a shippable state, we worked really hard on these features, so we gotta use them at least once because it'll pad out the runtime. So now we're stuck with a bunch of features that we get a tutorial for, and then we end up using once or maybe twice for less than a cumulative 5 minutes for the rest of the game. Alright, I can see the end of the video from here. We just gotta get through the story and the final thoughts, and then we're free. Aliens Colonial Marines has you playing the role of a Colonial Marine where you... I gotta be honest with you all, there is something about this game that is so unpleasant that even writing about it after playing it is a struggle. I finished this game on stream at the beginning of March, according to the metadata on my clips, and I got started outlining and trying to write this script as soon as I was done labeling said clips. It is now the very end of May as I write this last bit, and it's been just such a slog to force myself through this. I know, it can be fun to dunk on a game, but every time I try to write more about it, it's like pulling teeth. And I think it's because the game itself is such a slog. It's not a fun game to clown on. It was generally one of the most unpleasant games I've played in my life. I can now understand why people were so upset about this game back in the day, because good God, is it just irredeemable. The gameplay is bad, the QA is bad, the story is bad, but we just gotta get through this. You play as a Colonial Marine. I think his name was Winters or something, but I had to double check the Wikipedia and my footage for that because it feels vague and there's no real characterization. You're responding to a distress call from Hicks from the Aliens movie. You fly in on the USS Sephora, which is part of the USS Cole's battle group. Your squad mates are O'Neill, who gets to use a smart gun, and Girl. Okay, her name is Bella, but her entire role in this story is Girl and then plot device. We'll get more into that later on in the plot synopsis of this video. For now though, what we can talk about is that this game takes place a few months after the events of Aliens. I think it might actually have been more time when accounting for the speed of FTL travel in the Aliens universe, but I am no expert, as I have already established back in the Isolation video. I'm not like a super fan or knowledgeable source on the Aliens franchise. The whole game starts with that distress call from Hicks and a briefing that's trying really hard to emulate the intro of the Colonial Marines from Aliens, but just comes off as try hard. If I had to put my thumb on why it doesn't work, it's a combination of like attempting to be nearly beat for beat like that intro in the movie, and also the Marines themselves just don't seem to have that same familiarity as their movie counterparts do. The movie Marines talk shit on each other in a way that only the closest of friends can. You know, people who have already accepted that they're going to die shoulder to shoulder with each other before they even knew what a xenomorph was. Sure, this guy's swearing and at least acting like he's all tough and talking shit in the intro cutscene, but the chemistry isn't there. It feels like everyone here is trying to be an edgy dude bro shooter protagonist circa late 2000s when this game was supposed to come out, which makes emulating how the Colonial Marines actually were take a bad seat. Like, just as for the plot, don't worry, we're not in spoilers yet. It's the most predictable thing I've seen as far as Aliens media goes. It follows every beat that you'd expect from something that came out as a piece of supplementary material after the movie Aliens. The aliens are here, but Wei Yu is the actual bad guy, and of course they're experimenting with the xenomorph life cycle for various reasons that no one can ever quantify because it goes bad before they get meaningful results. This could be the plot summary of Colonial Marines or basically anything else since the 90s. Okay, that's enough just vaguely talking shit. Let's actually go over the plot. Very greasy spoilers incoming. So you get that distress call, and the new crew of Marines finds the derelict USS Sulaco. Oh no, it's filled with aliens! You and your squad are stranded inside while looking for answers, and as if matters couldn't get any worse, a bunch of mercenaries show up and just start shooting at you. We haven't seen Bella in a hot minute, so we gotta go save her with this power loader, and then rescue her from... oh no, she got attacked by a facehugger. What are we gonna do? Well, we're gonna get off the ship and try to figure out what was on that manifest that one guy had who died the instant it was in his possession. I was confused by this whole thing as we were the one who initially grabbed the manifest. The game made us give it to this guy, and then he immediately dies with it, so now we have to go down to the planet. Whatever, I guess we need to have a plot somehow. We barely escape the Sulaco and fly down to LV something or other and set up a base of operations on the old colony there. We gotta go to the secret but totally obvious Weyland-Yutani black site where, what a surprise, Wei Yu is researching how to weaponize the xenomorphs. Oh yeah, and there's the space jockey ship here. More on that in a bit, but what matters right now is that we finally get into the labs, corner one of the scientists, and he tells us, yeah bro, sorry, your lady friend is well and truly dead. We can't take these things out once they're in. And that is the one thing I respect about this game, is that they don't try to make some sort of contrivance to like a facehug character getting out of it. They die. We've got bigger problems though, as there is an alien queen somewhere in the colony, and somewhere is right on top of us. Run! We escape the queen, but now we gotta get off this planet as we found the secret manifest. It was Corporal Hicks from the movie, who was being held as some sort of corpo political prisoner. Hicks plot dumps at us and then explains that the literal last ship off this planet is leaving soon and we gotta go get on it. We do that. First, we fuel up our dropship, and then we take out all the AA guns before we can get on the big FTL ship, which we crash our dropship into, which people in the chat pointed out wasn't even facing the right way when we crash. We fight the alien queen, who is also here, unless it was like another alien queen, but fight isn't even the right word. We sneak around her, setting up a cargo slingshot, and then we throw her into space in a cutscene. We're not at the end just yet, though. Then, we get a 4.5 minute long cutscene that gives us a plot dump that Michael Wayland himself is aboard the ship, and he was the guy torturing Hicks this whole time. Also, of course, there's more secret corpo bullshit, but before we can get it out of him, Hicks shoots Wayland in the head, and what a surprise, it's actually an android clone of Michael Wayland. Bishop is able to Control-C, Control-V everything in android Wayland's head into his own, and according to Bishop, we got everything. What does that mean? What about all those other Marines we were supposed to rescue? Were they on the dropship too? What happened to them? Why are we just flying off into the sunset? Fuck you, DLC tease, that's why. But I'm not doing it. Nothing about this game makes me want to know more about what's going on, and even if I did want to, my PS3 can't access the internet anymore, so I can't download it. Also, I am not getting on PC, playing this all over again, and then buying the DLC to tell you, yeah, the DLC is kind of shit too. That would ruin the spirit of this video anyway, as the whole point was to play the game on the original version that people got so upset about in the first place. One last thing worth talking about in regards to this game's story is an odd issue that arises from the delays. That is, while this game was supposedly canon compliant, or trying to be canon compliant, there's the issue that this game was delayed for so long that the canon changed between when it was supposed to come out and when it actually did. According to an extremely exhausted look at the Prometheus Wikipedia page and like a few other pages, this video is already long enough without a deep dive on what the hell's been going on with alien continuity for the last 40-something years, so I'll just be brief. Prometheus was just kind of floating around his various ideas since a little after the first movie, but for all I know, this could be wrong, and according to the same page, Prometheus entered production about 2010, which was a year after this game was supposed to come out. And you know, now that I think of it, I'm not sure how much the space jockeys being the engineers and all the stuff that came with that meaningfully affects this game's setting, as it's essentially just trying to be Aliens 1.1. But it's wild to think about, and I can't think of any other situation where a supplemental piece of material for a franchise that was trying its best to be canon compliant got delayed for so long that the canon they were complying to changed around it. So now that I've done all this, tracked down an original copy of this game, played it on the original hardware, and made it all the way to the end, was it as bad as everyone made it out to be? No, it was worse. I can't ever claim to be as big of an Aliens fan I'd need to feel the possible physical pain associated with playing this on release, but goddamn, it is the worst thing I've played on the PS3. It's ugly. Where it's not ugly, it's janky. Where it's not janky, it's just badly designed. This is a game that genuinely has no redeeming qualities. I am aware that there's a small but dedicated group of people trying to mod the PC version of this game into something passable, and that there were at least a couple people that came into my stream chat while I was playing this saying that they enjoyed their time with the game. But this person also said that they were playing it while recovering from oral surgery. I cannot testify as to how well these modders have been trying to polish this thing into a coherent experience, but I am also aware that there seems to be an odd niche of creators, designers, and modders who see it as a challenge to take something objectively awful and turn it into something nice. I kid you not, there are people trying to resurrect Radical Heights, which... oh geez, it's been so long that Radical Heights might just be a deep cut for some of you. Like it or not, this game is a legacy. There's been God knows how many videos talking about this game already and what may or may not have been going on around it, and I tried to focus on the actual experience that drove the creation of all of that, and now that it's been over a decade since it all went down. Hell, this video, in a tiny little way, is now part of that legacy. I personally remember back in the day seeing all the negative buzz about this game and going, man, I am sure glad I'm not an Aliens fan right about now. but we all eventually will have our cross to bear. Want something more concrete? Well, thanks to the grace of it already being basically done, we still ended up getting Alien Isolation, which regardless of my personal preferences on that game is tens of thousand times better than Colonial Marines, because at least it does what it sets out to do, sticks the landing with minimal jank and bugs, and it's basically the best we've got. Alien basically got no traditional style standalone games. That is to say, things that were not promo material, mobile games, or something where the xenomorphs had to share the spotlight with the Predator or whoever else we had intellectual property rights to, after Isolation's release in 2014 until the next standalone Alien game, which was 2021's Alien Fireteam Elite, which I've also been told is kind of like Colonial Marines, except it's a good and enjoyable experience. Maybe I'll try to check that out one day, but I think I need to let the stink of Colonial Marines air out first so it does not negatively affect my views on Fireteam Elite. And after all of this, I think I finally get it. I now understand why people got so up in arms about the Alien Isolation video. It's because this was all they had after the inch away from ego death that was Colonial Marines, and you got jerked around for 5 years waiting for Gearbox to get bored of Borderlands and finish your game, and you're met with this? A game that, no joke, looked worse than the original trailers that were from 5 years ago and played like a leak alpha? And frankly, based on what I've seen, I think it might just be like an alpha burned onto a disc and then shipped, because so much of this just feels unfinished. I can't say that for certain, but I can say that everything about it feels like that. You come off this console generation defining boondoggle, and then you get one halfway decent game, a good game even, and it does justice to your favorite franchise in a way that hasn't ever been done before. So yeah, Isolation's the best thing ever as far as you're concerned, and anyone who says otherwise is wrong. And sure, you finally started getting some new stuff in recent years, if only to distract you from the hit or miss nature of recent movies, or if there should even be any new movies at all, but it's not quite on the level of the one good thing you got in the wake of Gearbox burning it all to the ground. I really hope for your guys' sake that the sequel to Isolation is good. I know it's been a while between games and a lot can change at a studio over a decade, but after seeing all this and having a bit more context for understanding, I think Aliens fans seriously need a win in the video game department. And with that, I will find a way to seal this disc away forever so that no one will have to play it again. Mod the PC version all you want, that's fine, but this abomination is being put in the prison realm. I hope that you all go over to patreon.com/charlatanwonder and take advantage of the Halloween in July special, where the yearly rate is as low as it'll let me put it, and any yearly pledge will get this new patch. Any yearly pledge at the $5 recipe tier or higher gets not just the patch and not just the patron apron, but also the special surprise thing, and I'm gonna keep this going for as long as I can. In the meantime, please don't forget to like and subscribe to, I don't know, just help me out. I don't know why this was such an exhausting video to make, but it certainly was. Let's sign off. Remember that no matter what you do, be it explaining the circumstances to your squad mates in front of a door, painting or dancing, what you do should never be called content. It is art. Content is a word that in recent years has been twisted into meaning a means to grind up all your skills, passions, and aspirations into a gray sludge for the purpose of making the line go up for someone else's benefit. Your art in no way deserves that, because art is sacred. Art is inalienably a reflection of its creator by the very act of making it, and in no way do you deserve to be reduced to gray sludge. So get out there and fight for yourself and fight for your art by fighting against the contentification of everything. Stay saucy.
Saucy boy. It was hardly a minute after I flipped these over that you have declared the painting table for the aprons your sitting spot. These are the aprons for the patrons. Look, let me flip one of these over. Oh, it's over here. It's like these, yeah. I gotta make sure the paint dries properly. I had a blanket over them so you wouldn't do exactly this overnight while they dried, and it kind of stuck, but not enough to mess with any of the paints. But now I'm worried your wobbles might affect the paints. Sir, These are special. They're for the patrons. Illegal sitting. I'm happy at least like all the apron strings are like tucked under so he like can't get at them. Because like I need to leave the house at some point during most days. And I can't leave all these aprons with wet paint on them unattended. Or I guess they're dry enough to where like, because these dried overnight, like I gave them 4 hours like the paint said on the label. And then like I left them overnight with the blanket over them. These should be dry enough to where I can like lightly stack them and like put them back in the closet. Because some boys just can't be trusted. You are an untrustable boy. Oh yes, illegal pets. Got a warning nibble. Sir, not everything in the world is your new sitting spot.